Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by saying a huge thank you to Mariam and Adam and Pervez for inviting me today. I kind of feel like a bit of a fraud on the end of this rather eminent panel. I'm not going to talk about things in the international context. I want to talk about contemporary Britain. I've worked for more than 20 years on violence against women in various guises. The Metropolitan Police has been mentioned. But I have spent the last year and a half researching polygamy as it happens in this country. And I've been fascinated by what I've discovered. Like many people in the room, I was born into a Muslim family, and I don't understand what happened. My father came here in 1956. He left the Indian subcontinent to have a better life, to escape poverty, to escape a class system that prevented him from the class he came from being who he wanted to be, to allow my mother to flourish and to develop. I have 4 sisters and a brother, and we've all been able to make our own choices. Yet I look around at the community I was born into, and I really don't know what happened. And all of my theories about feminism and about patriarchy, all my studying of the religious texts, and boy God have I done some of that, has just left me questioning more and more. I was born into a faith that condones slavery. I was born into a faith that very clearly, across the 4 Sunni schools of jurisprudence, legislates for inequality, not just against women, but against children too. And this is growing. I don't remember growing up seeing women wearing the hijab or the niqab. My mother never wore it. My grandmother didn't wear it. Where did this come from? So I thought I would use my policing background and spoke to some colleagues who were looking at anti-terrorism. And it's interesting that we are just a stone's throw from Tavistock Square, where those horrific bombings took place. And they started to talk to me about the internet and social networking and how young people were using all these different social media. And then I spoke to my children, who were both in their 20s, and they talked about their friends and YouTube Muslims, because that's where you get radicalised. So I thought, okay, right, well that leaves the older generation out. And even if you've listened to the news reports about what's happening in the Middle East and the revolutions that are taking place there, and how they're being, information is being circulated through mobile phones and the internet as a means of putting out a particular message. I don't think the internet is what we should be looking at in isolation. I think we've missed a trick. I've just started some research, and I wanted to talk about this. It's in the very early stages, but why lose an opportunity to talk about it? About how I think this, I don't even know if it's a resurgence or this emergence of a literal medieval interpretation of the Islamic faith is being propagated in this country. I'm going to concentrate on the South Asian community in Britain, because that's the country that that's the background that I come from. I just want to ask you all a quick question, so a very quick show of hands, and I know I've only got a couple of minutes. How many of you have access to satellite TV? Okay, very quickly, that's a substantial number of people in the room. What I want you to do when you go home today is, I want you to go home and I want you to go through the channels. Get your remote, sit down and just work through the channels. I've been doing this because I have no life. The thing that sparked it was an interview with Noam Chomsky and Jeremy Paxson. Noam Chomsky said that the internet was a fine invention, but he also warned that it could be used as a tool for surveillance, propaganda and control. And I thought, well, what about television? Because that's got a much wider reach. There are people who don't like computers, people who don't use the internet. So I started looking at all those channels that are available. And the insidious, invasive, pervasive nature of the information that is available there is shocking. absolutely shocking. Now, I've got the basic Sky TV package, and I'm not sure if Rupert Murdoch knows that he's actually helping fundamentalists across the world, but I'm telling him loudly and clearly now that he actually is. So I don't pay for any additional channels. I have the very basic package. I have counted that there are 13 Muslim channels, 3 Sikh channels, 3 Hindu channels, and 17 Christian channels that are available. Now, my data is not conclusive. This is just what I've been doing in the past few weeks. This is also those channels that identify as religious outlets and are also in languages that I understand. I speak 3 Asian languages, but I wouldn't know if the Arab channels were religious channels. I wouldn't know if any of the European language channels were, because I don't speak those languages. So I thought, right, I'm going to look at radio. 15 radio channels that are available through your satellite box that come into our homes. That's the first shock. The shock that then comes to me is I started looking for women on these channels. Now, I want you to think about who watches TV. It's every single one of us. The presence of women on those stations is incredibly limited. If you do see a woman, she is confined to talking about a woman's role as a wife and mother, and how that, is the most important thing in the world. She is draped in black usually, although there occasionally you do get a sparkly hijab, or a chador. Various denominations are there, whether it's Ahmadiyya Muslims, whether it's Shia Muslims, whether it's Sunni Muslims. And I have spent much more time looking at the Muslim channels. These are the images that our children are getting. These are the images that parents are getting all the time, that people are being confined to these stereotypes. All of the discussions are around the religious texts, but the minutiae and the detail of family life. There was one phone-in I listened to, and a woman rang I still can't believe she rang a TV station. She rang because she was worried about her daughter, who is suffering from anorexia and severe depression, but rather than take her to a medical professional, she was ringing an imam to ask him for an ayat that she could read to make her daughter better. To give the imam his dues, he did say, I'm not an expert, maybe you should see a doctor, but hang on, God says. All of the men in these channels, apart from being overweight, not very attractive, all have those sort of fist-length beards and prayer caps, and every other word is Allah says this and Allah says that. Anne-Marie used the expression intellectual sterility. For me, it's intellectual castration. It's horrific what is happening. And I'm now beginning to look at literature. I went with my mother to a couple of Urdu bookshops because my Urdu's not that brilliant, my written Urdu anyway. You can no longer get books about history. You can no longer get books about art or culture or architecture or archaeology or any of of science or any of the wonderful things that we could be expanding our minds with, or travel even. The only books that you have are about a very specific Wahhabi strain of Islam. And we've already had Saudi Arabia mentioned, but Saudi Arabia has oil, so none of us are prepared to challenge Saudi Arabian thought because we're so afraid of not getting access to the oil. Children's books. We have religious schools in this country. I mean, they're a step away from apartheid, in my opinion, and we fought for years as the anti-racist movement to break down those barriers. Children are being taught that mothers are covered up, that they stay at home, that they cook and they clean and they do nothing else. This is outrageous. And when the minutiae of your daily life is controlled to the extent that it is being controlled by these TV stations and these radio stations and these publishers, it's absolutely terrifying. Is it any wonder that the community that I came from, that has an incredible cultural, historical heritage, that all of that has now been denied and dismissed and hidden away for all eternity? And where will this stop? I've written to Ofcom, who regulate communications in this country, and I'm yet to receive a reply. But this is a piece of research that I want to take forward. And this isn't specific to Britain. go to Europe, go to America, go to, I go to Pakistan and India regularly, go anywhere in the world, and these channels are there. So how do we in Britain regulate overseas broadcasts? But at least we can regulate those British-based channels, those European-based channels through the power mechanisms that we have, be that through the European Union or through our Parliament. We've got to move on from mind control, and I'm going to say something that I'm going to conclude now because I know I've only got a couple of minutes. Any students of A-level history in this country will have studied Nazi Germany. And one of the books that's always stuck with me, and I did my A-levels about 100 years ago, was a book by a man called Richard Grunberger called A Social History of the Third Reich. If we do nothing now, where are we walking towards? Thank you very much.